So this video is kicking off an entire, I guess, week of just 2024 recap videos and then 2025, like, anticipated what I'm hyped for videos. I did start a video schedule back in December, couldn't stick to it. So this is going to be like a week of this stuff and then I'll get back to whatever that schedule was. But so this week I'm going to have like my favorite TV shows of 2024, which is what this is, then my favorite movies of 2024. Then I'm not going to do like traditional, top 10 worst movies and TV shows. I'm instead going to do what are my most disappointing movies and TV shows of 2025. So like ones that I was really hyped for or really excited for various reasons and then just didn't live up to those expectations. I feel like that's funner than just talking about straight up worst movies, because a lot of worst movie lists of the years are going to be pretty similar for everyone. It feels weird, dogging on the same films that everybody is. So I think it's funner to do like a disappointed list. Then I'm going to finish that out with what I'm most hyped or excited for in 2025. So videos will be going up there. I'm like, this is the TV shows I want to see. These are the movies I want to see. Stuff like that. I'm also going to then put out a video after all that where I'm talking about what I think are the most underlooked or underrated TV shows of the 2020s in general. So shows that have started in the 2020s that like not enough people have seen or not enough people are talking about. Anyway, this isn't going to be a traditional top 10 video either. The shows I'm talking about are my top 10 favorite shows, but they're not going to be in any order. I've just randomized a list and then just going to talk about them in that order rather than do like 10, 9, 8, 7 sort of thing. There were a lot of big shows of the year that I missed or I didn't get to watch for various reasons. I actually watched a lot less shows in 2024 than I did in 2023 and 2022, which is kind of disappointing. I think I hit like 160 new seasons in 2022, which is crazy because I had college the beginning and the end of that year. 2023, I think I hit just over 100. And this year, I think I only got about 70 shows, so a lot less than I usually do. Like House of the Dragon Season 2, I didn't get to. The Bear Season 3, I didn't get to. To be fair, I heard from people and friends who have seen those seasons that they weren't the best, so I don't think they would have ended up pretty high on this list anyway. X-Men 97 is another big one I didn't get to see. I know, huge DC Marvel guy, but I want to wait until I can rewatch the original animated show, but get time to do that before I check out the 97 season. Anyway, that was a lot of rambling at the start of this video, sorry. Let's talk about my 10 favorite shows of the year. So the first show that I want to talk about is actually the earliest show that came out this year, that ended up on this list, came out in January, Masters of the Air, a 9-episode war miniseries that was released on Apple TV, and this show was in various stages of production and development since like 2010. I loved it so much. I thought it was great. It is already on like my top 50 shows of all time, which is another video I want to do at some point. But Masters of the Air was the third and final World War II project to release from Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg's World War II project, where they had like Band of Brothers, The Pacific, stuff like that. The Band of Brothers being 2001, I think, and The Pacific being 2010, and then Masters of the Air finishing that out in 2024. So pretty big gaps between all those shows. But Masters of the Air stars Austin Butler, Barry Keoghan, Callum Turner, Anthony Boyle. Side note for a sec, okay? Anthony Boyle kind of came out of nowhere because I know he was in The Plot Against America, but I didn't know him when that came out a few years ago. But this year alone, he was in like 4 major TV shows. Like after Masters of the Air came out, he was then in Apple's Manhunt, where he played John Wilkes Booth. He was in Disney Plus's Shard Lake. He was in the Irish FX drama Say Nothing, which came out only like 2 months ago. I didn't get to watch Say Nothing, but Shard Lake and Manhunt I saw, and just the guy's just he's like a major character in all of them. Like you could argue he's the main character in Masters of the Air. You could argue he's the main character in Manhunt and Shard Lake. I think he technically is in both, but it's it's crazy how like after barely seeing him in anything, he's just out of nowhere in 4 of the bigger shows of the year. I'd say Anyway, that didn't mean to get sidetracked there. Masters of the Air focused on the 100th Bomb Group and their bombing campaign throughout Europe and parts of Africa during World War II. The 100th Bombing Group saw an insane casualty rate during the war, some of the highest in the entire war, because they were flying over like direct German occupied countries in Europe and stuff like that, where they were getting shot down the whole time. The German prisoner of war camps early on in the war were just filled with American pilots and stuff like that because of just how much their pilots were just getting downed. It's crazy. And the show was really just intense from this standpoint of like, you really don't know who's going to get shot down in this episode or who's going to get shot down in the next episode sort of thing. But the show in general was just really interesting and well put together, in my opinion. I loved pretty much the entire thing. Now, I do think I'm biased because I love war TV shows and war movies, but Masters of the Air was that one show that I feel like every year for the last 3 or 4 years I've been, oh, is it finally going to come out this year or what's going to happen, because we've been hearing about it for so long. But finally getting it, it was so high up my anticipated list, and I feel like I was pretty satisfied with it. Like, I don't feel like there's anything I really would have changed. Maybe a 10th episode so that it has the same episode count as Band of Brothers and the Pacific. But other than that, I think it was an almost perfect kind of 9-episode miniseries. The show unfortunately didn't tend to land as well with either critics or a general audience. I barely saw any talk or buzz for it when the show was coming out, unfortunately. Like, when it did release, I didn't really see anybody online talking about it. The places that did talk about it kind of kept comparing it to like Band of Brothers and the Pacific, which, Band of Brothers and the Pacific are two of the best things ever made, like, when it comes to TV or film, in my opinion. So it's a really unfair comparison to make, because all three are very different shows. So a lot of places discussing Masters of the Air couldn't help but be like, well, it's not as good as these two, so maybe set your expectations. So that was unfortunate. The next show I want to talk about is one of the later shows that came out this year, and that is Superman and Lois Season 4. Now, the final season of the show is also the final DC TV season to air on the CW, so it was sort of an ending of an era. It stars Tyler Hoechlin and Elizabeth Tulloch, and Season 4 was all about dealing with death and finality, and what it means to move on, and what it means for your life to change in dramatic ways that you're not sure how to handle. And the season had a few small missteps here or there, but for me, I think it sort of, anytime I would have something that I was like not too crazy about, it would immediately follow up with something I loved. It's not the best season of the show for me. I think seasons 3 and 1 are both a lot stronger. But season 4, like with the premiere, the finale, and episode 7 in particular, were some of the finest hours of the entire show. Like episode 7, for example, is one of my all-time favorite episodes of TV, I think. The show kind of went like out on its own terms, thankfully, despite the powers that be sort of slamming the hammer down and saying you're not getting your 7-season plan. And I felt like the show really did stick the landing. I think they were able to give some fantastic moments, some of the best character looks into Clark Kent and his dynamic and duology with the Superman identity happened in this season. Like, season 3 was very much a Lois Lane focused season, and I felt like season 4 was very much a Clark Kent focused season. Like, I feel like if you're looking for the best Lois Lane moments, season 3 has so many of them, but if you're looking for the best Clark Kent moments, season 4 is probably much more what you're looking for. And I liked it because it freed the season up to be very much about Clark and the inner turmoil and the fights inside of him and how his life has led him here and what's going to happen to him. And the finale, it felt a little rushed at times, but I felt like the final 10 to 15 minutes were such a great cap on the show as a whole, and such a great... It's exactly how I wanted the show to go out, to be honest. I think it made perfect sense with what the history of the show had been, and what, like, the show was always about the humanity and the personal moments of both Clark Kent and Lois Lane. And I think that is how the show ended, where they highlight the human of both characters. If you're in any way a DC or Superman fan and you haven't seen Superman and Lois, you gotta watch it. It's one of the best DC shows out there. The next show I want to talk about is a little unfair because technically it didn't air its entire season in 2024, because we still have a third and final part to come out in February. But parts 1 and 2 of Cobra Kai Season 6 released throughout 2024, the first 10 episodes of a 15-episode final season, and to be honest, I'm actually very surprised that the show ended up on my top 10 of the year. It just barely made it in. I think it's number 10. But on first watch of part 1 of the season, I was honestly quite disappointed in the direction they were going and how they were handling a lot of the characters, and a lot of just the final elements I didn't feel like were slotting into a good place, to the point where my excitement for part 2 was really quite low. I didn't even watch part 2 like until the week after it came out, despite Cobra Kai being one of my favorite shows. But part 1 was all about setting up the characters for the big Sekai Taikai World Tournament, and then part 2 was actually showing that tournament. And I remember hearing from people, especially Darren over on his channel, that part 2 was really, really, really good and a lot better than part 1. So I checked it out pretty quickly after he was telling me about that, and that string of episodes really changed my whole view on the season. I still think that there were moments throughout part 2 that stung, of that annoying character flip-flops that the show loves to do, where, I mean, characters in Cobra Kai are never consistent. I think that that's one of the big things about the show. Everybody flip-flops all the time depending on their allegiances or depending who the writers want the characters to team up with this time. And part 2 and part 1 was still very much that, where it was characters would flip-flop and change who they like and change who they don't like very, very, very often. But as a whole, I think the 5 episodes in part 2 were some of the best and most intense and fun episodes in the show. It felt like it had a lot of the best parts of like seasons 3 and 5, which are my two favorite seasons of Cobra Kai. It had some of the best fights, it's had some of the best and worst Robbie moments, it had some of the best Miguel moments. The whole thing actually also changed my thoughts on part 1, where after watching part 2, I revisited the 5 episodes of part 1 and was kind of more into them this time. But Cobra Kai, like I said, has been one of my favorite shows on TV for a while. I've been watching since it was on YouTube Red. I think I started the show between the seasons 1 and 2 break, and then after season 2, it became a Netflix show. But I think season 3 was still technically made by YouTube Red. Anyway, most of the time I've been loving the show. Despite my frustrations with the characters sometimes, it's still such a fun show. Super excited for part 3 and the final episodes hitting Netflix next month. Another show that came out pretty early in the year and that I was so happy with and so impressed with was Fallout. It was released in April 2024 on Amazon Prime. It stars Walton Goggins, Aaron Moten, and Ella Purnell. And the show was everything that I, as a huge Fallout fan, kind of wanted to see. I'm a big fan of the games. I pre-ordered Fallout 4 back in school when it was like one of the 3 games I could afford a year. But just Bethesda game studios in general are where a lot of my favorite video game memories are. Like Skyrim is my favorite video game of all time. Got like 6,000 hours in that game at that point. If you'd add up kind of all my Xbox and PC and PlayStation sort of things together, I've got an insane amount of hours in that game. And I know we're in sort of a video game adaptation golden era at the moment. Like it feels like movies and TV shows that are adapted on video games are just getting better and better. But I was still kind of concerned for what the quality of a Fallout TV show was going to be. To be honest, I'm still kind of in disbelief at how good it was. Like, I don't think I expected this to be one of the best shows of the year at all. I was thinking, hey, maybe I'll really like it, but I didn't expect it to be potentially my favorite show of the year. As well, to the point that the show broke so far out of just the video game audience as well. Like, I had so many people who aren't fans of the video game were like texting me when it came out and were like, oh my god, Fallout is so good, are you watching it? Whatever. And it's just, that was really cool to me as well, that it elevated the IP in general to the point where so many people are like, oh, Fallout, I should check that out, I should see what that's about. It actually got me to go back and play the Interplay Fallout 1 and 2 games for the first time because I'd never played them before. Like, you know, the show was just really sort of pushing that IP out there and pushing Fallout as a brand in front of everyone. The way the show also just follows these 3 characters and their storylines, and how each character sort of feels like how when you start a game of Fallout, you might take one of the 3 different paths. Like, you come out the vault, that's Lucy's character, or you could be like the ghoul where you're just being, you know, sort of a lone wanderer character, or you could be like Aaron's character where you're going to the Brotherhood of Steel. And it's just, I really like that sort of thing where it felt like you're watching 3 different gameplays of a Fallout game, but putting them together. And then how the show sort of weaves together all these storylines is also some of the most satisfying TV I've seen in years. Like, the score was also magnificent, but I'm also realizing that I feel like all 4 shows I've mentioned so far are my favorite TV scores of the year. But yeah, Fallout was so good. Next up is HBO's Industry Season 3. Industry has a pretty big ensemble cast, so I'm not really going to list them here, but season 3 actually added Kit Harington, who most people know as Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, so he was added this season. And Industry Season 1 and Season 2 were also really great, but I think Season 2 was when I started to see this show as one of the best shows that it's currently airing on TV. But I think Season 3 is also the first time that I started seeing people actually talk about the show every week, like online. Like, I feel like during Seasons 1 and 2, I didn't see a lot of people talking about it outside of like diehard TV circles. People would be like, oh, Industry is really good. But with Season 3, I was actually just seeing random people tweet about it, being like, oh, Industry is on tonight, it's really good. Whatever. The show is set in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and is set in London's Wall Street, essentially, like London banks and stuff like that. Very, very fast-paced, intense show. A lot of these characters are pretty much all assholes, just trying to make money for these other companies, and what it causes for them in terms of mental breakages and in terms of how working in this industry really does change them as people and make them worse, or they try and get out and try and get better or whatever. I think outside of like Last of Us or House of the Dragon, Industry is probably HBO's biggest current ongoing show. So not counting like a miniseries like The Penguin or stuff like that, I think Industry is their big show that has multiple seasons that's currently airing. We don't even know if like The Penguin is getting a season 2, so I wouldn't count that just yet as like alongside this. But yeah, Industry, it's a quick enough watch. Each season is 8 episodes. Might not be a good binge because the episodes are pretty heavy and can be depressing and kind of leaves you a bit disgusted with everyone, but I do think more people should be watching Industry. Next up is the only animated show on this list, and it is My Adventures with Superman Season 2. So another Superman show made on this list. Surprise, surprise. Stars Jack Quaid as Clark and Alice Lee as Lois, and it's having aired on Adult Swim. I do think this show is my biased put, where I'm like, I don't see this show being on many people's best of the year list at all. But as a Superman fan, I'm just always extremely like happy coming out of an episode of this show. Like, it's not really a show I sort of sit with and I think about after it ends, but it makes me happy. I don't know how to describe it. This is a show. It's a feel good show that makes me happy. We got introduced to Supergirl this season, and I felt like they did a really good job at intertwining her character with Clark's character, giving a really cool backstory. Really cool villain. Won't spoil who it is, but they brought in a big Superman villain and really cool tie to everybody. And they've also got this like always this awesome background music and stuff like that going on. I know it's a fun show. Every episode sort of hypes you up and makes you feel good. And I'm really happy that the show is getting a season 3. It's one of the few DC shows to be able to survive outside of the DCU. So I'm happy My Adventure Superman is this. But I feel like if you're a DC fan, you shouldn't be missing out on this show. Next up is HBO's The Penguin, starring Colin Farrell. And I'm sorry, Marvel, but I feel like outside of X-Men 97, which I haven't seen, DC easily took the cake for this year in television. Like, they have the much stronger lineup in television in 2024. I think the quality was so much stronger. Now, The Penguin didn't surprise me personally because I fully expected a DC HBO show being helmed by Matt Reeves. Coming out of the Batman stuff was going to be amazing. Like, I didn't think it was going to be bad. I thought there was no way this show could have been bad. But the best thing about The Penguin was that they committed to the fact that we were watching and following a villain. Like, they didn't shy away from the more evil parts of the show or the evil parts of the character. We were able to utilize that to tell a much more fascinating and interesting story while still digging much deeper into the character, so that when he shows up in the Batman Part 2, for example, we'll feel more of an attachment to Oz. Sophia Falcone made an excellent antagonist, as well as bringing in Victor as this really fun sort of like sidekick almost to Oz. But I think The Penguin is 100% the best thing that DC put out in 2024, and it's immediately one of the best TV showings we've ever seen from Marvel or DC. So I've talked about all the comic book shows of the year. The next show I want to talk about is FX's Shogun, which was initially supposed to be a miniseries, but just based off of the reception, the viewership that the show was getting, they've already renewed it for a season 2, which is interesting because it's based on the book of the same name, but I think the book ends where the show ends, so a lot of people are like, what are they going to do for the second season? Which that seems like something a lot of shows are doing lately, that they're based on a book, meant to be miniseries, show comes out, does way better than they expect it to, and then a second season comes out that kind of does stuff that goes beyond the book. So that's not a new thing, but it stars Hiroyuki Sanada, Cosmo Jarvis, and Anna Sawai, and I don't think I'm wrong to say that this was one of the bigger and more impactful shows of the year. Like, I think it's one of the most popular shows of the year, easily. It was one of the non-comic book, non-franchise shows that was dominating social media while the episodes were coming out every week, and I feel like every month since it wrapped, I've seen a scene or a clip or something from the show posted on Twitter or something like that. And people are like, "Oh my god, look at Shogun! Like, I'm just watching it; it's so good." It definitely feels like one of the ones that ended up on a lot of best of year lists as well. Like, a lot of my friends I've talked to who watch a lot of TV shows were really big fans of Shogun, and just in general, like a lot of the lists I've seen online, Shogun's rating pretty high. It just about made it into my top 10. I wasn't as hot in it as a lot of people, but I still really enjoyed it. Just, I think it's like number 10 or number 9 on my list overall. But I did have a really, really, really great time with it. The setting and the music were all amazing. The acting and the cast is the best thing about it, I think. The story was fascinating, I thought. And I love period pieces in general, but especially period pieces that kind of dig into a country or an era, or like something like this that I know so little about. Like, I don't know a lot about feudal Japan and that sort of part of history, so the show was really, really enjoyable for me as somebody coming in and being like, okay, so it's cool to kind of get a bit of experience of this sort of stuff that I was not already familiar with. Second last is what I personally think is one of the most underrated shows on television at the moment, and that is Apple TV's Slow Horses, which it stars mostly Gary Oldman and Jack Lowden, with Hugo Weaving having joined on for the 4th season, which was the most recent season. And Slow Horses is set in London and is sort of about the rejects of the British intelligence service MI5, where anyone who pisses off someone that they shouldn't piss off gets sort of sent to Sly House, which is where they get sent when they're not really wanted working for the proper part of MI5 or whatever. And when they get sent there, they kind of have to do spy shit under Gary Oldman's character. It's one of the most consistent streaming shows on TV at the moment, where somehow, just like The Bear, Slow Horses has been able to release a season every year since it started. Which the way that they film the seasons as well really helps with this, because they normally get renewed like for the next season after the one that's supposed to come out, and then they're already filming it pretty much when the new season comes out. So it's like season 5, for example, they already had a trailer for season 5 at the end of season 4 with a date announced. The show's already been renewed for season 6. And they've been really consistent with doing this the whole time as the show's been going on, where you kind of are always assured that there's going to be another season of the show next year, which is really impressive in an age of streaming where we're waiting sometimes 4 or 5 years for the next season of a new show to come out. Like Stranger Things, for example. How long are we waiting for season 5? Like, and the gap between season 3 and season 4 of that show was also insane. So it's cool to have shows like Slow Horses and The Bear where we're actually getting them at a consistent pace that feels like we're with these shows every year. Now, it is only 6 episodes a season, so it usually feels like once the show has finally started, it's already ending. So you don't spend too much time with it every year. But I do appreciate that they are able to stick to a consistent schedule. It's also just impressive as well that the show is actually really good every year. Like, they've not had a bad season yet. The dialogue, I think, in the show is just so intense and witty, and the show is just in general has such a nail-biting vibe to it when it needs to, but it's also like a funny show as well. I think this is one of the shows that more people should be watching, to be honest. I'm really happy it's on Apple, because I feel like if any other streaming service was airing this show with the viewership and the low, like, I don't know, the low talk the show gets online, that any other place would have cancelled the show by now. But Apple seems to be a place where they sort of see when shows are going to be good and they just let them go, and they've got the money to just throw at them and keep them going despite the fact that the viewers might not be there for it. Apple's really good at just building up a really good catalog of like shows you probably haven't heard of but are actually really good. And the last show I'm going to talk about as one of my top 10 favorites of the year is another show that I think is heavily underrated, and I'm also so happy hasn't been cancelled yet, is AMC's Interview with the Vampire. And season 2 came out last year, starring Jacob Anderson, Bailey Bass, and Sam Reed, among others. And I feel like even if you don't watch the show, you're probably vaguely aware of what the story of Interview with the Vampire is. The book is pretty iconic. Then there was that Tom Cruise Brad Pitt movie, which personally I think that the show was much better than the movie was. But the story, it's just an author in present day, or a writer in present day, interviewing the last 200 to 300 years of this vampire's history. It's really good. It's got a great atmosphere. It's got a great vibe. The sets are phenomenal. Season 2 takes us through like 1940s post-war Europe and France, and the aesthetic that it brings to it is one of the cooler production designs on TV at the moment, I would say. It's similar to Slow Horses, where not enough people are talking about this show to the point I'm actually really surprised it's not been cancelled yet. But Slow Horses, where like you've got rest assured that unless the show is just doing terribly, Apple's not going to cancel it. AMC are a lot more trigger happy with what they cancel and what they renew. So I'm really surprised Interview with the Vampire has been renewed for season 3 and hasn't been cancelled yet, because especially in recent years, AMC kind of just cancel things when they're not getting the viewer, like if they're not getting Walking Dead numbers, they're just like, all right, get rid of it. So happy it's still going. But yeah, check out Interview with the Vampire. Anyway, that's what I think are the 10 best shows of 2024. What were your favorite shows of the year? Again, a lot of shows I missed out on this year, but are any of your favorites on this list? Are there any that weren't on this list that you think I should check out or you think deserve recognition? Let me know, and thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe consider liking, sharing, subscribing. That always is a huge help, and I hope you have an amazing day.